upholding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy should itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. Welcome to today's broadcast. I am Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Today is April 22nd, 2019. We're going to have an interesting program today. We're going to talk about energy, we're going to talk about capitalism and the relation between each. The first article that I showcase today is titled, Alternative Energy Sources Cause Huge Increases in Utility Prices. And my question is this: how much additional fees would you pay for energy in order to have so-called clean energy from windmills or solar panels? Would you pay twice as much? 3 times as much? Well, the fact is, across America, the average price per kilowatt hour is somewhere around 12.5 cents. In Arizona, it's a little bit less, but across the country, 12.5 cents is a pretty good average. Every time alternative energy sources are introduced into the mix of energy supply to consumers, prices go up. This isn't predicted necessarily. Of course, they say, well, clean energy is going to cost less in the end. That's not true. In every case that alternative energy has been brought into the mix, electricity prices go up. This story concerns Minnesota. And in the article it states, residential electricity in Minnesota currently costs 12.47 cents per kilowatt hour. That's roughly the national average, according to the Energy Information Administration report. On the other hand, Germany offers a helpful comparison, it says, since it has been incorporating a similar renewable energy effort for more than a decade. While Germany has embraced wind and solar power, its electricity costs have skyrocketed to 30 cents per kilowatt hour, the highest in Europe, according to Energy Transition. Even with massive subsidies, Germany's wind turbines and solar panels still provide only 29% of the country's total electricity generation. So you see here the fact that they've even incorporated or pushed in 30% roughly of electricity generation, prices have gone up 300%. Further down in the article, you get a little bit of an explanation as to why. It says, there's also a fundamental inefficiency. Wind and solar perennially require backup systems for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. According to the Department of Energy, the most advanced wind turbines reach their full capacity only 42.5% of the time. The highest performing solar panels, ones in the southwestern U.S. that feature sun tracking motors, reach their full capacity at an even lower 30% of the time. Such intermittency issues explain why Germany still relies on coal plants to generate additional power when needed. I'll point out, too, that Germany has abandoned some of its wind-powered fields because they're too costly and too inefficient. Yet, the push for wind and solar power in America and around the world is unrelenting. When will people wake up to the fact that energy is what drives the economy? Nothing happens in the economy without the addition of energy, unless, of course, you're making something in your woodshed and you're doing it all by yourself, in which case you're one-person power. Otherwise, all economic activity in a modern world is directly dependent upon energy. In fact, it's one of the main inputs to any business. If you raise the cost of that input, let's say 200 or 300%, what's going to happen to economic activity? It's going to go down. Just that simple. Alternative energy sources cause huge increases in utility prices. Just remember that the next time you see a rate increase on your local energy bill, take a look and see if they're mixing in so-called green energy, renewable energy. This is the latest fad, by the way, to offer renewable energy to people. They're doing this in California. California ratepayers are mostly opting out for it. Others are opting in. Oh, we want to be doing our responsible thing here. We want to have renewable energy in our house, so we'll pay 20% more. This is crazy. Self-annihilation. The next shock story that's kind of leading to a conclusion is indeed a shock. A study coming out of Germany has determined that electric vehicles emit more CO2 than diesel cars. Get ready for this. I better say that again. Electric vehicles emit more CO2 than diesel cars. Wow, I thought diesel cars were going to be completely eradicated and that the world is going to be saved by electric vehicles. Take all those nasty hydrocarbon cars off the road, have nice, clean electric motors running, humming cars down the road with great efficiency. Sorry, that's not the real world. Electric vehicles may be cool, and I'll add a caveat that when their battery packs are not on fire, they're more dangerous to the environment than their diesel counterparts. And yet all the eco-nuts who think they're saving the world by driving electric vehicles are totally deceived by marketing propaganda. I put a picture in this article showing a Tesla charger, of which there are many across the country now, and right next to it, this is not uncommon, a diesel generator. Now tell me what's wrong with this picture. The diesel generator fires up when power is needed at the Tesla charging station. That's right. The energy is being generated on the spot by a diesel generator, portable diesel generator, smokestack and all, that automatically kicks on when it's necessary to supply additional power to the charging station. This doesn't make much sense to me. Well, the article states electric vehicles in Germany account for more CO2 emissions than diesel ones, according to a new study by German scientists. When CO2 emissions linked to the production of batteries and the German energy mix, in which coal still plays an important role, are taken into consideration, electric vehicles emit 11 to 28% more than their diesel counterparts, according to the study presented on Wednesday at the IFO Institute in Munich. Mining and processing the lithium, cobalt, and manganese used for batteries consume a great deal of energy as well. A Tesla Model 3 battery, for example, represents between 11 and 15 tons of CO2. Given a lifetime of 10 years and an annual travel distance of 15,000 kilometers, this translates into 73 to 98 grams of CO2 per kilometer. Scientists Christian Buchal, Hans-Dieter Karl, and Hans-Werner Sinn noted in their study. The CO2 given off to produce the electricity that powers such vehicles also needs to be factored in, they say. When all these factors are considered, each Tesla emits 156 to 180 grams of CO2 per kilometer, which is more than a comparable diesel vehicle produced by the German motor company Mercedes, for example. How about that? It just doesn't add up. We're told that electric vehicles are going to help save the environment. Well, that's assuming, of course, that CO2 is a nasty, evil greenhouse gas, which is not. But by their own standards, those who are saying we need to take CO2 out of the atmosphere to save the world, they're doing just the opposite with the solutions that they offer, like EVs. This is absolutely insane. Yet, this is the insanity that's overtaken the world. The last story and the most important story we're leading up to here that I want to bring up is titled, Eco-Activist Makes Outright Call for the Overthrow of Capitalism. This is not new, but here's one more headline article that just came out where an eco-journalist by the name of George Monbiot appeared on a far-left political chat show called New World Order, and he's a columnist and an environmental activist. He explains how we have to save the planet. He calls for an outright overthrow of capitalism. And here's what he says. This is right out of his mouth. We have to overthrow the system which is eating the planet. Perpetual growth, he said. And the writer pulled no punches. Annual economic growth targets of 3% represent madness, he said. The columnist reached his crescendo when he said, quote, we can't do it by just pitting around at the margins of the problem. We've got to go straight to the heart of capitalism and overthrow it. Does he need to beat around the bush here with us? No. He says it straight up. Well, I did a little search, knowing that there have been many articles of this nature over recent history. I did a little search for United Nations replace capitalism, just those 4 words, and listen to some of the headlines that come up from The Independent in the United Kingdom. This is how it says, this is how UN scientists are preparing for the end of capitalism. The New American, quote, UN panel says capitalism must go. Motherboard, advice.com. Scientists warn the UN of capitalism's imminent demise. There's another one from Forbes. Quote, the UN's global warming war on capitalism. Another one. UN-appointed climate science team demands the end of capitalism. There's another from investors.com. UN official reveals real reason behind warming scare. That's the destruction of capitalism. Theconversation.com. Quote, today's youth reject capitalism, but what do they want to replace it? UNenvironment.org, associated with the United Nations, quote, capitalism is not suitable for the future. And lastly, from Zero Hedge, a story, UN official admits global warming agenda is really about the destruction of capitalism. That's just the first page of the Google search, where it found 29,700,000 results for those 4 words. United Nations replace capitalism. I won't read you the second page. I think 1 page is fine to get the point across. The United Nations, with all of its trickle-down agenda around the world, is sworn to destroy capitalism. They make no bones about it. And people like George Monbiot are simply following the party line, religiously, I might add, following the party line by saying capitalism is an enemy. We must destroy capitalism, throw it out, overthrow it, and replace it with what? Well, there's only one thing offered anywhere in the landscape, and that is sustainable development. And as you know, as I have documented in my book, Technocracy Rising, as well as Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, sustainable development is technocracy, simply warmed over from the 1930s. It's the same thing, a resource-based economic system controlled by energy. This is exactly what they're proposing. Now, we need to discuss this just a little bit because this is so critically important to understand. If America loses its economic system, if capitalism is truly overthrown, our economic system will just disintegrate. It'll be completely thrown into the hands of the global elite. And individual entrepreneurs, individual business owners, individual consumers, and citizens in our country will be basically pushed back to the Stone Age again. This is not what anybody in our country really wants, but this is the agenda that's being put forth by the United Nations. And people across the world, including in America, are jumping on the bandwagon to condemn capitalism, saying that we must overthrow it. That's what the problem is. That's the evil problem in the world, is capitalism and free enterprise. And yet there's no historical basis at all for implementing sustainable development. It's never been tried. It's never been proven. There's not one shred of evidence that it's going to work. In fact, one study I saw of economists that actually have looked at the green economy and AOC's so-called Green New Deal say it's absolutely impossible to work for the benefit of mankind. Absolutely impossible. I agree with that, by the way. Now, I want to read again a couple of small portions from my book, Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. And I don't do this just to repeat myself. I do it to underscore the point of what's going on with sustainable development, 2030 Agenda, Agenda 21, the New Urban Agenda, the green economy, the Green New Deal, you name it. I want to underscore how this happened back in 1992 when the big push to establish Agenda 21 was made at the Rio de Janeiro conference, the first Earth Summit in Brazil. This is where the Agenda 21 doctrine was formed. This is where the term sustainable development was popularized. This is where the tsunami started, with all the thousands and thousands of people who attended and ratified the first Earth Summit document known as Agenda 21. There were people there at the conference, participants, who did not universally agree with Agenda 21. They saw through it. They saw a different picture. And these were people who were direct participants in the process leading up to Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development. Two of these people, Pradip Chatterjee and Matthias Finger, wrote a book 2 years later called The Earth Brokers. They were there and they saw. They participated. They were, in fact, environmentalists, I say of the original order, not like modern-day environmentalists. They had a little bit more head on their shoulders, I think. But in any case, they preceded the major part of globalization, and they found themselves deeply disappointed in the entire process and the outcome. This is what they wrote in their book, The Earth Brokers. And as I talk about UNCED here, by the way, UNCED, that's the official name of that conference, the Rio Conference, UNCED, United Nations Conference on Economic Development. This is what they wrote. We argue that UNCED has boosted precisely the type of industrial development that is destructive for the environment, the planet, and its inhabitants. We see how, as a result of UNCED, the rich will get richer, the poor poorer, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. Close quote. That's pretty blunt. They understood what the problem was before 1992. The globalization process that was already pressing in. They saw the players. They saw the international movers and shakers. They saw them setting up this entire conference to build up a scam to throw against the world. They weren't the only ones who were critical, by the way. There were others, plenty of them. Toward the end of the Earth Summit, this is from page 21 in my book, toward the end of the Earth Summit, youth representatives were allowed to give their impression of the process and proceedings. And they selected a young lady from Kenya who worked for the International Youth Environment and Development Network in Nairobi. Her short, pointed, and shocking statement left many attendees in dead silence. Now, I might add, this young person was not allowed to actually vote or do anything substantive to contribute to the proceedings. They were just auditors. But they invited them to come and see because they, of course, they are the future generation. And they were involved with the International Youth Environment and Development Network. It's a nonprofit environmental group. So they and other young people were allowed to come and kind of audit the proceedings. So this young lady got up and made a statement. And at the end of the statement, as you'll see, the entire audience was stunned, absolutely stunned. They had nothing to say because her logic was flawless. They knew it. They ignored her, by the way, just wished she'd go away quickly, and they went on with business as soon as she sat down. But she absolutely singed their eyebrows. And here's what she said. This is a direct quote. The summit has attempted to involve otherwise powerless people of society in the process. But by observing the process, we now know how undemocratic and untransparent the UN system is. Those of us who have watched the process have said that UNCED has failed. As youth, we beg to differ with it. Multinational corporations, the United States, Japan, and the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, have got away with what they always wanted, carving out a better and more comfortable future for themselves. UNCED has ensured the increased domination by those who already have power. Worse still, it has robbed the poor of the very little power that they had, and it made them victims of a market economy that has thus far threatened our planet. Amidst elaborate cocktails, travailing, and partying, few negotiators realize how critical their decisions are to our generation. By failing to address such fundamental issues as militarism, regulation of transnational corporations, democratization of the international aid agencies, and inequitable terms of trade, and she concluded, my generation has been damned. And she sat down. I don't have to read between the lines for you to understand what she said and what the authors of the Earth Brokers said. The very people who were gaming the system before 1992 were the ones that gamed it again in 1992 for their own financial benefit, for their own hegemony of power over the world and the world economic system. These people saw through it because they understood already, even before that, before they went, they understood how the world was already being hosed, if you will, by these people. And they went there with the hopes that this is going to change, that somehow the citizens of the world were going to take back what is rightfully theirs and not go forward with these companies that were in effect destroying the world as they knew it. Now, when the United Nations says in their Sustainable Development Goals that they're going to eliminate poverty everywhere, we know that's not true. They say they're going to do that, but they haven't reduced poverty. They've been trying now since 1992, actually, and in earnest since 2015. Have they decreased poverty in the world? No, they haven't, and they never will, because that was not the game plan in the first place. That was simply the promise that could never be realized. Utopia simply does not exist, and it never will. So as we look at calls today to eliminate and overthrow capitalism and free enterprise, what's going on here? How does this fit in to the original plan that really was hatched in earnest in 1992? You can read my book, of course, to get all the details. It goes back further than that, but this is the balance point that I want to talk about right now in 1992. What was hatched in 1992, called Agenda 21? Was it a document to save the world, or was it a document to dominate the world? There's no in between. The plan was to take over the resources of the world, not to benefit the citizens of the world one iota. We've seen this played out again and again and again. And now the useful idiots like George Benoit are telling the far left crowd, and of course AOC's in the same boat, so is Justice Democrats and so on, they're yelling from the tallest tower, we need to overthrow capitalism. They don't always say with what will it be replaced. The United Nations has already settled that. It is sustainable development. That's the only alternative they have. And I document very carefully in both of my books that sustainable development is technocracy. There's no need to call it anything else. It's a resource-based economic system originally designed in the 1930s by engineers and scientists to control the entire economic system from cradle to grave. This is exactly what we have today. It's exactly what we're heading at. And people who are making the bulk of the money off of the so-called green economy are those giant multinational global corporations like Siemens and Bechtel Corporation and General Electric and IBM, etc. These giant companies are the ones that are raking in the cash. In the meantime, the middle class is getting decimated. This has been going on for a long time. I'm just simply helping you connect the dots here. The big guns are getting all the money. The little guns are getting forced out. And unless somebody recognizes along the way that this has to stop and somehow citizens stand up and say, no more of this, it'll simply continue in the same direction. So that's the goal, in any case, of Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, is the domination of the world's resources by a very small global elite in order to control all the citizens of the world economically through economic ends without respect to any well-being of those same citizens. We're led to believe that we have a voice, that we have some power. That, my friends, is an illusion. We need to wake up and smell the coffee. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Have a great day.